the most visionary directors of our time, Guillermo del Toro. He's got a new book out. It's The Strain. It's an amazing book. I read it front to back in almost no time at all. It just blew right through it. And the first obvious question is that we know you from film, from Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy, from all the other projects you've worked on. What made you want to sit down and write a book?
Well, I wanted to. I've been writing all my life. I've been writing screenplays, obviously 17 screenplays or so I have written or co-written, and I've written short stories. I'm a voracious reader. I have my man cave, which is essentially a gigantic library, and I've written studies on Hitchcock that were published in Spain and Mexico and so forth. But I wanted to try and do a long form sort of adventure that was too insane and too brutal for film, and that would give me some freedom to experiment and finally put together what I think about vampire anatomy and biology.
You mentioned the insects from Kronos. Is that where you got some of the inspiration for the stinger?
Well, actually, the stinger comes from I read a lot of books on vampirism and not fiction, but what is called fact. Compilations, historical compilations of oral tradition, folklore, and so on and so forth. And one of the ideas that they have is Polish vampires in mythology. They have a stinger instead of teeth. So I read that when I was a kid, and it was sort of embedded in my mind.
You worked with Chuck Hogan on this. How was it to collaborate with someone else on this, and what did Chuck bring to the project?
Chuck is one of the best writers of thrillers right now, and I really am a big fan of his, and I really went after him, and we agreed to collaborate in equal terms. We agreed it would be a partnership. We would not share the weight, and I wrote some chapters, he wrote some chapters, we exchanged those, we continued writing, edited each other mercilessly, and eventually we came up with what I think is a book that feels like one voice.
Now, the hero of our story, or your story, F is an unwilling hero. But the thing is that even though he's a doctor, even the common man can kind of relate to him. He's had a divorce. He has a young son. How was it to write F and develop his character? And where does the name F come from? It's a very old world origin, I believe.
I love the names to have the feel of sort of Dickensian names. Eldridge Palmer, which is an homage to Philip K. Dick, but at the same time is, all those names Dickens did. Uriah Heep, Eldridge Palmer, Ephraim Goodweather. They are really names of a novel, a character out of a novel. And I invented all of them except a couple of characters that Chuck came out of the blue with ideas for example, Vasily Fett, which is the rat exterminator. He came up with that on his own. He just came back one day and said, look, I did this, and I was blown away. Abraham Satrakian is another great name, They're powerful names, and I just find like in Dickensian mythology, the name is the character.
Now, most of the story takes place in and around New York City. Were you ever afraid that on a national scale that some people might not be as into it because of the in-depth detail that you go into New York City, or were you confident that the picture you were able to paint with your words was going to be able to bring the people to that place, even if they've never been to Times Square?
Yeah, because I think that Hitchcock did it with his movies. Hitchcock was incredibly precise about the places he shot. So Vertigo is a completely San Francisco film. Shadow of a Doubt is a Santa Rosa, California film. And he was incredibly precise about that. And I think there is, if you want to be universal, you want to be really particular. In other words, it's fascinating to read about New York if you live in Oklahoma or in Mexico City, and as long as you explain where they are, you don't just say Times Square. But in the case of Times Square, actually, it's almost like Disneyland for people. It's like they see it now as a touristic area, safe, full of lights. When I was younger and I came to New York, Times Square was quite different.
Now, of course, you mentioned some movies, some of Alfred Hitchcock. What other inspirations do you have aside from Hitchcock when you take on any kind of project?
Well, I love certain writers. I love certain directors, Luis Buñuel, Hitchcock, Chaplin. Depending on the project, there's different inspirations. And in the case of The Strain, I think we wanted to go back to the hardcore novels that I remember reading in the 1970s as a kid. That at the peak of Stephen King, you would not be able to put Stephen King down. No one writes like Stephen King, but the idea was to make it, if possible, rhythmically as engrossing as possible.
Now, also speaking a little bit about movies, we know that you're working on The Hobbit as a writer and the director. How is that project coming along?
Great. We're co-writing every morning. It's under court right now. I finished a little bit of extra load to be able to do the 10 days of the book tour, but it's really like living a dream, because these are the best partners any creator could ever wish for.
When you take on a project like The Hobbit, there's such a strong fan base. How much do you take into consideration the fans of a who has a following for such a project like that?
You have to think about it. You have to listen to those voices, but you don't take dictation. At the end of the day, the fan that you have to please is you, if you are a fan. And if you're not a fan, you shouldn't be making the movie. So, you have to follow your own instincts. You listen to everything, and you have to, because I really think the fan base has a right to have a voice and to be heard. And sometimes they make you think twice and change things.
One last question is that we know, of course, one of the best, one of my favorite movies, also as a huge fan, is Hellboy and Hellboy 2. And I had an opportunity to speak to Ron Perlman the other day, and he's ready and willing to go for Hellboy 3. Is there any hopes for a third Hellboy movie?
I don't know, because Ron, when we come out of The Hobbit, Ron is going to be in his 50s, deep into his 50s, and I don't know if he'll resist another 10-hour makeup sessions for X number of years. But if we were financed, if we were able to do it, I would love to do it.
Guillermo, thank you very much for your time. The book is The Strain. It's out now. This is Ray Carsillo for 1050 ESPN and 1050ESPN.com.